Welcome to Dreaming of Bells, Story 1, The Message Bottle Waltz, Chapter 1, Morning Chimes in the Plaza. The day began the way many days began on Lullaby Key, with the soft official cheer of the resident services chime, like someone politely tapping a spoon against a teacup to announce that the world was ready. In the plaza, the early light slid across the brickwork in warm squares. The flag stirred lazily on its pole. A few leaves, golden because the season couldn't resist being decorative, pirouetted down from the hardwood trees and landed with the delicate confidence of things that had done this before. Isabel stood at the counter inside resident services, perfectly centered in her little universe of order. A fresh mug sat beside her, something warm, something soothing, something that smelled faintly of reassurance. Her ponytail bobbed as she reviewed a neat stack of papers that were probably not very heavy but looked important anyway. Across from her, Tom Nook adjusted his sweater in that subtle way that made it look as if he'd invented sweaters. "Good morning," Isabel said, as though she had personally arranged the sunrise and was delighted you'd noticed. Tom Nook nodded, calm as an anchor. "Good morning. Yes. Another wonderful day for island life." Outside, the bulletin board held the usual cheerful clutter. A notice about a fishing tourney in a few days, a reminder from Isabel about being kind, and a hand-drawn poster advertising a free hugs, ask first initiative that no one could quite trace back to its original author. The plaza wasn't empty. It never stayed empty for long. Roald, a round penguin with the athletic ambition of a creature that did not need to run anywhere, jogged in confident circles as if the plaza were a track and the day a race he intended to win. 1, 2, 1, 2, he shouted, counting steps that did not require counting, because the point was not mathematics. The point was energy. On the bench near the fountain, Marshall sat with a small notebook, legs crossed, looking like he was waiting to be interviewed for a magazine called Squirrels Who Have It Together. He wrote something, paused, tapped his pencil against his chin, and then frowned at the page as if the paper had offered an opinion he did not respect. Nearby, Marina hummed quietly while watering a patch of flowers. The watering can made that gentle, satisfying sound, shh, like the island itself exhaling. From the path toward the orchard came Tangy, orange-haired, bright as a happy idea, wearing a simple tee that made her look like she'd stepped out of a sunny brochure. She carried a small basket, and the basket held 3 apples, 2 pears, and 1 peach that seemed to be blushing. At the edge of it all, where the plaza opened toward the beach path, you arrived, the resident representative, the person everyone treated as both friend and mild miracle worker. You were dressed for comfort, a cozy cardigan over a simple shirt, socks that didn't itch, and shoes meant for walking without hurrying. Because on Lullaby Key there were very few true emergencies, and yet sometimes there were mysteries. Isabel lifted her head as you approached, smile already prepared. "Oh, good morning," she said brightly. "I have announcements." You waited in the polite, island-approved way. Isabel flipped a page. "Let's see, we have a visitor at the campsite today, and, She glanced down at her notes, and the very tip of her tail made a small, pleased wag. "And the weather is going to be simply lovely." Tom Nook folded his paws. Yes, a fine day to check on your home improvements, perhaps. Or your savings," Isabel beamed. "Or to enjoy a stroll." Behind you, Roald's jogging intensified as if the word stroll had challenged him personally. You thanked Isabel because that was the rhythm of things, and stepped back outside into the plaza's calm brightness. The day felt ordinary in the most comforting way, like a song you already knew, which was exactly the sort of day a message bottle would choose to arrive. Chapter 2. The Pier, where curiosity washes up. The path to the pier ran along the eastern beach, where the sand was pale and clean and scattered with shells like tiny souvenirs left by the tide. As you walked, the world offered its familiar little sensory comforts: the soft crunch of sand underfoot, the ocean's hush, the distant cry of a seabird that sounded like it was calling to someone who owed it money. At the waterline, a few shells glittered. You picked one up, spiraled, pinkish, and slipped it into your pocket, out of habit, out of affection, out of the quiet certainty that shells were always useful later. The pier itself jutted into the sea like an excited finger pointing toward the horizon. Today the horizon looked like a watercolour, light blues layered with softer blues, a few clouds lounging like they had nowhere else to be. Someone was already there. Cap'n stood near his little boat, arms folded, looking like a sailor who had wrestled many storms but currently preferred mild conversation. His cap sat at an angle that implied he had opinions about the wind. "Ahoy there, Cap'n of the land," he greeted you with a grin. "You out for a bit of sea air? A wee voyage, perhaps? I've got a tune that's just itching to be sung." "Maybe later," you said, because it was still early and your to-do list had not yet agreed to be flexible. Cap'n nodded solemnly, as if that was wise. "Aye, the sea'll wait. It's patient, like a turtle with a calendar." You stepped closer to the end of the pier and looked down. That's when you saw it. A glass bottle, rolling gently in the wet sand, nudged by the tide like a shy guest arriving at a party. A message bottle. On Lullaby Key, message bottles were a delight and a mild obsession. They were small mysteries, small gifts, small reminders that the ocean connected your island to an unseen world full of other islands and other lives. You crouched, reached, and plucked it from the sand. The glass was cool. The cork looked snug. Inside, a rolled paper waited like a secret. Behind you, Cap'n let out a thoughtful "Something washed up, did it?" he asked, as though the ocean had just tossed you a coin. "It's a message bottle," you said, unable to keep the little spark out of your voice. Cap'n leaned in, eyeing it with theatrical suspicion. "Could be treasure, could be trouble, could be a recipe for sea bass surprise." "Let's hope not," you said, smiling, and tugged the cork free. The paper slid out with a soft scratch. You unrolled it carefully, smoothing it against your knee. The handwriting was neat but hurried, as if the writer had been trying to be brave. "To whoever finds this, if you're on Lullaby Key, and I think you might be, please help. I left something important at Moonview Cliffs, tucked where the cedar roots twist like a knot. It isn't dangerous, it's sentimental, but I can't get back there right now. If you find it, please bring it to the roost and ask Brewster to hold it behind the counter. I'll come for it when I'm able. A friend who owes you one." You read it twice, then a third time because the words felt like they had weight, soft weight, like a blanket folded just so. Moonview Cliffs were up on the island's northern ridge, a favourite spot for stargazing. The cedar roots there were old, and the ground was dotted with little white flowers that looked like they were listening to the wind. The note wasn't dramatic exactly, but it was specific. And on an island where life was made of gentle routines, specific was the scent of adventure. Captain watched your face. "Well now," he murmured hot, "that's got the sound of a wee quest, don't it?" You folded the note carefully and slid it into your pocket beside the shell. "It does," you said. And as if the island heard you and approved, the ocean gave a soft, rhythmic hush, like applause from far away. Chapter 3. Recruiting a party in the friendliest way possible. No one on Lullaby Key ever really did anything alone, not because solitude was forbidden, but because someone was always offering help in the most casual, neighbourly way. You could have headed straight for Moonview Cliffs. You were capable. You had a ladder in your storage and the confidence of someone who had paid off at least one home loan. But a note like that felt shared. And so you did what island life trained you to do. You told a friend. You found Marina first because she was near, and because Marina had the gentle, steady energy of a lullaby wearing a bow. She was still by the flowers, watering with careful attention. "Good morning," you said. Marina looked up and smiled, eyes soft. "Oh, hi, isn't the light pretty today?" "It feels like the whole island is smiling." You held up the note. "I found a message bottle," Marina gasped in a delighted, polite way, like someone appreciating a gift that wasn't even for them. "Ooh, what does it say?" You told us about Moonview Cliffs and the cedar roots and Brewster's counter. Marina's hands clasped in front of her. "That's so mysterious, and also kind of sweet, like someone trusting the island to be kind back." "That's what it feels like," you agreed. Marina nodded thoughtfully. "If you want, I can come with you. I'm not fast, but I'm very good at noticing little details, like if a leaf looks like it's hiding something." "That might be exactly what we need," you said. Next, you went looking for someone with energy. You didn't have to look far. Roald was still in the plaza, now doing something that looked like a mixture of jogging and celebrating. "Roald," you called. Roald skidded to a stop, tiny feet kicking up imaginary dust. "What's up?" You showed him the note. Roald read it with intense concentration, lips moving silently as if the words were a workout. Then he looked up, eyes shining. "Moonview Cliffs, cedar roots, a secret item? This is like training for the soul." "Would you like to come?" you asked. Roald puffed out his chest. "I was born ready." A rustle of leaves announced Marshall's presence as he approached, notebook tucked under one arm. He looked at Roald, then at you, then at Marina, and did the thing Marshall often did, where his face suggested he was above chaos, while his feet betrayed that he was already stepping into it. "What's going on?" Marshall asked, voice light but curious. You explained. Marshall's brow lifted. "A note from a friend who owes you one. That's vague." "It's also kind of charming," Marina said. Roald nodded fiercely. "And it's a mission." Marshall sighed the sigh of someone pretending not to care. "Fine, I'll come. Someone has to keep you from sprinting off a cliff." Roald looked offended. "I would never." Marshall's eyes narrowed. "You would absolutely." And just like that, you had a party. Marina, detail noticer, and hope holder Roald. Enthusiastic muscle and motivational shouting Marshall, skeptical brain and emergency sarcasm. You, the steady centre with pockets full of tools and a talent for making life on an island feel like a story. Before you left, you stopped by your house, because quests were romantic, but preparation was practical. You changed into something suited for climbing, a comfy outfit with sturdy shoes, a little backpack, and a hat that said, in its own quiet way, "I may encounter wind." You grabbed a ladder, you grabbed a vaulting pole. Roald did jumping jacks while you packed. Marshall inspected the sky like it might be plotting against him. Marina tucked a small snack into her bag. Simple and sweet, the kind of thing you ate when you wanted the day to feel gentle no matter what. "Okay," you said, closing your storage with a satisfying click. "Moonview Cliffs," Roald raised a fist. "Moonview Cliffs," Marshall muttered. "I regret everything," Marina smiled. "I think it'll be nice." And off you went up the winding paths of Lullaby Key toward the ridge where the island kept its stars. Chapter 4. Whisperwood's Quiet Tests. The route to Moonview Cliffs took you through Whisperwood, the cedar grove that always felt a little like a place where secrets lived politely behind trees. The cedars stood tall and close, their trunks straight as sentences. Light filtered down in thin beams, turning the air into something you could almost see. It smelled like pine and earth and time. Roald, who was not famous for quiet, automatically lowered his voice. "This place always makes me feel like I should say, 'Excuse me,' to the trees," he whispered. Marshall glanced around. "That's because it feels like the trees are listening?" Marina nodded serenely. "Maybe they are, but I think they're friendly listeners." As you walked, the path curved and narrowed. A butterfly drifted past your face, slow as a floating petal. Somewhere deeper in the grove, a branch snapped. Roald froze. Marshall froze too, but in a cooler way. Marina blinked. You paused, listening. Another snap, closer this time, followed by a soft, indignant huff. A shape burst out of the shrubs and into the path. It was Lucky, the bandaged dog villager, moving fast with a dramatic urgency of someone who had just remembered something extremely important. He skidded to a stop when he saw you. "Oh!" Lucky said, voice bright. "Hey, sorry. I wasn't running from anything. I was running to something, but then I forgot what it was. So now I'm running from forgetting." Marshall stared. "That's honest." Lucky peered at your group. "Are you going somewhere? You look like a group going somewhere." "We're heading to Moonview Cliffs," you said. "We found a message bottle." Lucky's ears perked. "A message bottle? That's like the ocean texting you." Roald nodded solemnly. "Yes," Marina smiled at Lucky. "We're looking for something tucked under cedar roots." Lucky pointed dramatically at the ground. "Cedar roots are everywhere here. The island is basically a root with vibes." Marshall rubbed his forehead. "Please do not join us." Lucky tilted his head. "I wasn't going to. I mean, unless you want me to. I'm really good at finding lost stuff. I lose stuff all the time, so I understand it emotionally." You considered it. In a long series of stories, you'd need a world where characters drifted in and out, where today's side character might be tomorrow's main. And Lucky's energy fit the island. Whimsical, earnest, lightly odd, and not scary. "Sure," you said, "if you want to walk with us for a bit." Lucky beamed. "Yes! Okay, I'm helpful. Also, I brought snacks." He held up a little paper bag. Marshall's eyes narrowed. "What kind?" Lucky peeked inside. "I think it's either cookies or bait." Roald gasped. "Bait? Cookies?" Marina giggled, a sound like a tiny bell. You kept walking. The group now one bigger, the grove now a little less quiet. Whisperwood didn't feel like it was testing you in a frightening way. It felt like it was doing what the island always did, gently rearranging your day into a shape that made room for connection. Chapter 5. The climb toward Moonview. The path out of Whisperwood opened onto the northern slope, where the land rose in soft terraces. You could see the cliffs above, lined with more cedar trees and dotted with white lilies that swayed as if practicing for a performance. A wooden incline led upward, and beyond that, a spot where a ladder would be needed. You set your ladder down, steady and practiced. Roald bounced on his toes. "This is vertical time." Marshall stepped onto the ladder carefully, as if he had once been personally betrayed by gravity. Marina climbed with steady grace, pausing halfway to look back at the view like she was framing it for memory. Lucky climbed last, humming a tune that sounded like he'd invented it 5 seconds ago. At the top, the air felt different, cooler, lighter, full of sky. Moonview cliffs spread out like a quiet rooftop of the island. From here you could see the plaza far away, tiny and peaceful. You could see the pier like a line drawn into the sea. You could see the waves folding and unfolding in their patient pattern. "This is where wishes land," Marina whispered. Roald nodded, unusually reverent. "I have wished here before." Marshall looked around. "Okay, cedar roots, twisted like a knot." You began to walk along the edge, not too close because no one on Lullaby Key fell off cliffs unless it was in the very specific, very safe way of game physics. And still, it was polite to respect the edge. The cedars up here were old. Their roots curled above the soil in places, gripping the cliff top like fingers. You searched for a spot where the roots twisted like a knot. Lucky wandered a little to the left, peering under bushes. "If I were a sentimental object, where would I hide? Probably somewhere dramatic, but not inconvenient." Marshall pointed. "That root cluster there." Roald crouched, examining the ground like a detective in a sports movie. Marina moved slowly, eyes scanning for something that didn't belong, something placed intentionally. You found it not by seeing something new, but by noticing something too neat. A small patch of soil at the base of a cedar looked slightly smoother than the rest, like someone had patted it down with care. You knelt. "Here," you said softly. Roald leaned in. "Dig time!" You pulled out your shovel. The first scoop of soil lifted easily. The second did too. The third struck something that made a gentle clink. Your heart gave a small, excited jump, the kind you could still fall asleep after because it wasn't panic, it was wonder. You brushed the soil away carefully. A small tin box emerged, slightly scuffed, with a little latch. Marina clasped her hands to her cheeks. "Oh," Lucky whispered, "that's definitely sentimental." Marshall looked impressed in spite of himself. "Well, that was actually competent." You lifted the tin and held it in your palms. It wasn't heavy. It was the weight of something that mattered because someone decided it mattered. You opened the latch. Inside, wrapped in a folded piece of cloth, was a tiny item, a little charm shaped like a star, simple, handmade looking, along with a folded note. Roald leaned closer, eyes wide. "Read it!" You unfolded the note. The handwriting matched the message bottle, neat but hurried. "If you found this, thank you. This charm was made on Star Night, the meteor shower. Someone gave it to me when I felt like I didn't belong here yet. I want to give it back. But I'm not brave enough to do it face to face. Please leave it with Brewster. He'll understand. A friend who owes you." One Marina's eyes shimmered with the quiet kind of emotion that never felt heavy, only warm. "A charm from Star Night," she whispered. That's really special." Marshall folded his arms, but his voice softened. "So someone's carrying a lot of feelings." Lucky nodded sympathetically. "Feelings are heavy even when you're light." Roald looked suddenly very thoughtful. "Who made it?" You looked at the charm again. It was a star, yes, but the stitching around its edge, tiny, precise, looked familiar somehow, like the kind of stitching you'd seen on a sweater or a hem, or the edge of an apron. Marshall's gaze flicked toward Abel's sisters in the distance, as if his brain had made the same connection. Marina said it out loud, gently, like she didn't want to accuse anyone of being secretly sentimental. "Do you think Sable—" Lucky gasped. "Sable is so secretly sentimental," Marshall corrected him automatically. "Sable is openly sentimental. She's just quiet." You carefully rewrapped the charm, placed it back in the tin and closed the latch. "Let's take it to Brewster," you said. "Like the note says," Roald saluted, "mission objective, deliver hope," and you began the walk back down, tin box safe in your bag, the sky above wide and kind. Chapter 6. The Roost's Gentle Magic. By the time you reached the museum, the sun had shifted into that pleasant part of the day that felt like a warm loaf of bread, golden, steady, and making you hungry for no particular reason. Inside the museum, the air changed immediately, cool, calm, and softly echoing. Blathers was near the front, as always, looking like an owl who had read every book and still thought books were exciting. "Hoo, good day," he said, delighted. "Have you brought any new donations? Any fascinating discoveries from our island's bountiful wilderness?" Roald opened his beak, probably to announce the quest, but Marshall gently put a hand up. "We're just passing through," Marshall said. "No bugs!" Blathers visibly relaxed. "Ah, wonderful, splendid. Carry on then. Yes, yes." You headed down the stairs to the roost, where the lighting softened and the world felt like it had been turned down to a comfortable volume. Brewster stood behind the counter, calm as ever, polishing a cup that looked like it was already clean but appreciated the attention. The cafe smelled like coffee and quiet conversation. A gentle jazz tune drifted through the air, music that sounded like it wore a small hat. Brewster looked up as you approached, eyes steady. "Coo," he greeted, which in Brewster language meant "Welcome. You are safe here. The world can be held gently." You set the tin box on the counter. "I found this at Moonview Cliffs," you said. "A message bottle told me to bring it to you and ask you to hold it." Brewster's gaze fell to the tin. He didn't look surprised. He looked understanding. He nodded once, slowly, as if he had been expecting a piece of the past to arrive. "Coo," he said again, softly this time. He took the tin and placed it beneath the counter in a spot that felt like a small pocket of trust. "Safe," he said, one of the few extra words he offered, and it landed like a blanket on your shoulders. Marina exhaled, as if she'd been holding a tiny worry and could let it go now. Roald looked pleased, like a hero who had completed a heroic errand. Lucky whispered, "Brewster is like emotional storage." Marshall murmured, "Don't say that out loud." Brewster, as if he hadn't heard, or as if he had and accepted it, reached for cups. "Coffee?" he asked. And in that moment you realized this was the island's true magic. Not danger, not drama, but the way a mystery could lead to a warm room, a shared table, and the sense that someone somewhere might soon feel brave enough to retrieve what mattered. You all ordered. because on Lullaby Key you didn't rush away from comfort. Mariner chose something warm and sweet. Roald, perhaps out of character, chose something simple. Lucky asked if Brewster had anything that tastes like luck, and Brewster responded with the exact same calm, as if that were a normal request. Marshall drank his coffee like it was a private agreement between him and the universe. You sat together at a small table. Outside, the museum's quiet grandeur held its fossils and fish like stories asleep in glass. Inside, your little group talked softly, not about the mystery exactly, but about Star Night, about the first time each of you had wished on Lullaby Key, about how friendship often arrived disguised as routine. And then, because the day had one more gentle turn to offer, Isabel's voice floated down the stairs from above, bright and polite. "Oh, Brewster, I'm so sorry to bother you, but—" Her voice paused, as if she'd spotted you all and decided that this was also a social moment. "There you all are," Isabel said, stepping into the roost with a smile. "I was just coming to get my usual, and also to ask if anyone has seen Sable today. She left her stitching kit at resident services, and she never does that." Marshall's eyes flicked to you. Marina's hands folded together. Lucky made a tiny "Oh!" Roald whispered. "The plot thickens." And you, warm coffee in hand, tin box safely hidden behind the counter, felt the story open like a door. Because if Sable had left her stitching kit somewhere unusual, and someone had written "a friend who owes you one," then story one was not only about finding something, it was about returning something. And that meant the next part would be gentle, hopeful, and brave, exactly the way Lullaby Key liked to be. Chapter 7. Isabel's Question, like a feather landing. Isabel hovered near the counter with the careful politeness of someone who didn't want to interrupt the cozy atmosphere, even though her entire job was, in a way, to interrupt the island with helpful information. Brewster slid her usual drink across the counter with a practiced gentleness. "Coo," he said. Isabel's shoulders softened. "Thank you, Brewster." She turned to your table, paws clasped in front of her, eyes bright but slightly puzzled. "So sorry to pop in like this," she said, "but I was wondering, have any of you seen Sable today?" Marina's gaze drifted down, then back up. "Not yet. Is she okay?" "Oh, I'm sure she is," Isabel replied quickly. "It's just, she left her stitching kit at resident services. That's not like her at all. She's so careful. She's the kind of careful where I once saw her fold a ribbon so neatly it looked like it had been ironed by the idea of an iron." Marshall took a slow sip of coffee, eyes half-lidded. "So why ask us?" Isabel wagged her tail once, apologetic. "Because I'm trying to be helpful, and also because sometimes when something is slightly unusual, it's good to ask the people who, end up in the middle of things." Roald straightened proudly. "That's us." Lucky nodded. "We have middle of things energy." You felt the tin box behind Brewster's counter like a quiet secret you were not supposed to share. Not yet. The note's request had been clear. Leave it with Brewster. Let the owner come when they were able. But Isabel's mention of Sable's missing kit made the air in the cafe feel like it had gained a second melody, one that braided with the first. Marina leaned toward you slightly, voice soft as foam on the shore. "If it's Sable, maybe the charm." Marshall's eyes flicked to Brewster, then back to Isabel. He spoke carefully, as if he were trying to step around someone else's feelings without making them stumble. "We haven't seen her," Marshall said, "but we can check in." Isabel's relief was immediate and heartfelt, the kind that made you feel like you'd just done something heroic even though you'd only agreed to walk somewhere. "Oh, thank you," she said. I'll let Mabel know you might stop by." Roald thumped his chest. "We'll find the truth," Lucky whispered. "Truth is usually hiding behind a tree." Brewster's eyes rested on you for a moment, steady, calm. Then he nodded once, almost imperceptibly, like, "You're doing fine. Go gently." You stood, gathered your things, and waved goodbye to the warmth of the roost. Outside, the museum's doors opened onto the bright day. The plaza was visible in the distance, and beyond it, Able Sisters' little shop sat like a tidy square of comfort, waiting. Chapter 8. Able Sisters, Where Threads Hold Stories. The walk to Able Sisters took you through the plaza again. Roald immediately slowed near the fountain as if the water demanded respect. Marshall glanced at the bulletin board, then pretended he hadn't. Marina paused to smell a flower. No hurry, no pressure. Lucky picked up a fallen leaf and examined it gravely. "This leaf has seen things." When you reached the tailor shop, the familiar sign swung gently above the door. Inside, the room smelled like fabric, wood, and that comforting, slightly sweet scent of new clothes that made you feel like you could begin again. Mabel looked up from the front counter, a measuring tape draped around her neck like a friendly snake. "Oh, hi, she chirped. "Welcome!" Behind the counter, Sable sat at her sewing machine, hands moving with quiet precision. The rhythm of the needle was steady, ch-choh, like a small heartbeat. Sable looked up. Her eyes were calm, but there was something in her expression that made your chest feel tender. Not sadness exactly, more like someone holding a memory gently and hoping it didn't slip. Mabel glanced between you and Sable. "Are you here for fashion or, something else?" You kept your voice soft. Isabel mentioned Sable left her stitching kit at resident services. Mabel's ears drooped a little. "She did. I thought it was just one of those things, but Sable never forgets her kit." Sable's paws paused on the fabric. She didn't speak right away. Sable rarely did. But she looked down at her hands, then at the seam she'd been working on, as if the thread could guide her through the moment. Finally, Sable gave a small nod. Marshall's voice softened without him noticing. "Did something happen?" Sable's gaze drifted toward the window, out to the plaza, out to the ocean beyond. Mabel leaned forward. "Sable?" Sable took a slow breath, then reached into a drawer by her machine and pulled out something you hadn't noticed before. A folded piece of cloth, old, carefully kept. She held it in her paws, and for a moment the shop felt like it had become quieter, as if even the mannequins were listening. Sable spoke, voice low and a little scratchy from lack of use. "Star night." Marina's eyes widened gently. "The meteor shower?" Sable nodded again. Her paws tightened slightly on the cloth. Mabel's expression softened, understanding dawning like sunrise. "Oh," Roald whispered, reverent, "the night of 1,000 shooting stars." Lucky made a tiny sound, half gasp, half, "Oh no," like he'd just remembered something important about someone else's heart. Sable swallowed, then continued, words slow, chosen carefully. "I made something," she said, barely above the hum of the sewing machine. "That night." You felt the tin box in Brewster's keeping like a little star behind a curtain. Sable looked at you, not accusing, not demanding, just present. I gave it away, she said, to someone who needed it. Marshall's eyebrows knit. And now it's missing. Sable's ears lowered. I don't know where it is. Marina's voice was warm. We found something on Moonview Cliffs. Mabel startled. You did? Lucky leaned in too quickly and bumped the counter with his elbow, then apologised to the air. Sorry, I'm emotionally clumsy. You spoke gently, careful not to break the shape of the moment. We found a note, you said, and we brought what it mentioned to Brewster for safekeeping. Sable's eyes flickered, just a tiny movement, but it was like seeing a candle catch. Mabel's paws flew to her mouth. Brewster has it. You nodded. He's holding it behind the counter. Sable's gaze lowered again. For a long second, the shop was filled only with the faint sound of fabric shifting and the outside breeze nudging the sign. Then Sable whispered, almost to herself, They're coming back. Marina stepped closer, slow and respectful. Is that good? Sable's mouth curved into the smallest, most fragile smile. Yes, she said, I think so. Marshall leaned back slightly, letting his scepticism settle into something quieter. So the person who has it is returning it, but anonymously. Roald thumped his chest, subdued now. That's brave. Lucky nodded fiercely. Anonymous bravery is still bravery. Mabel looked toward the door, then back to Sable. Do you want to go to the roost? Sable's paws tightened again. She shook her head, a small, quick movement. Not yet, she said. Marina's voice was soothing. That's okay. Sable looked at you again, and in her eyes was a clear request without the weight of obligation. Stay kind, stay patient, let it happen gently. You nodded, as if answering the request with your whole posture. We won't rush anything, you said. Sable's shoulders loosened slightly. Mabel brightened, trying to lift the room without changing its tenderness. Well, if you're doing a mission, you might need outfits. Roald perked up. Outfit buffs, Marshall deadpanned. That's not a thing. Mabel giggled. Not officially, but I can help you look capable. Lucky raised his paw. Do you have anything that says I'm accidentally in a mystery? Mabel blinked. Maybe. Sable's fingers returned to her stitching, but the rhythm was different now, not tense, more hopeful. You left Able Sisters with a new understanding. The charm mattered, not because it was rare, but because it was a reminder of belonging, given at the right moment, held for a long time. And now, circling back. Chapter 9. The Island's Gentle Net of Coincidences. As you walked back toward the museum, the island seemed to lean into the story the way it sometimes did, subtly, kindly, like it was arranging the day so people could meet the moments meant for them. Near the plaza, you heard a familiar voice before you saw the speaker. Hey, over here! KK Slider stood near the fountain, guitar case at his feet, sunglasses on, even though the sun didn't really demand it. He waved at you like you were old friends, which on Lullaby Key was usually true even if you'd only said hello twice. Dig the vibe today, KK said, strumming a few lazy chords in the air as if the music lived there already. Feels like one of those days where something small turns into something big. Marshall stared. Do you know what's going on? KK shrugged with cosmic calm. Nah, but I can feel the island's tempo. It's doing that thing where it goes do-do-do and then bam! Heart stuff. Marina smiled. That's a very good description. Roald leaned in. Do you have a song for quests? KK nodded solemnly. I got a few, Lucky asked. Do you have a song for returning something but being too shy to do it directly? KK's ears perked. Oh, buddy, that's like half my catalogue. He strummed a soft, sleepy chord progression, the kind that made your shoulders relax without you noticing. Here, KK said, and his voice lowered like he was sharing a secret. If you run into someone who's nervous, don't crowd 'em. Just keep the light on. People come to light when they're ready. You felt that sentence settle into you like warmth. Thanks, you said. KK gave you a thumbs up that looked like it had been practiced in mirrors. Catch you later, he said. I'll be around. I always am. And he wandered off, a quiet soundtrack in sunglasses. Chapter 10. The Roost, again, and a visitor in the corner. When you returned to the Roost, the cafe was busier. A couple of villagers sat at tables, sipping and murmuring. The gentle jazz still floated through the air like a slow-moving cloud. Brewster stood behind the counter, steady as stone in a river. He spotted you and nodded once. Coo, he said. Welcome back. Still safe. You approached the counter carefully, not wanting to make a spectacle. Is the item still safe? You asked, softly. Brewster's gaze flicked down, just a tiny acknowledgement, and he nodded again. Safe, he said. You turned slightly to check the room, because if someone was coming for it, they might already be here. They might be the kind of person who would sit in a corner and wait until their courage caught up to their plan. Your eyes drifted across the tables, past Diana chatting gracefully with Fang, past Dom laughing into his drink like the foam had told him a joke, and then, there, in the far corner, half shadowed by the warm lighting, sat someone alone. A villager with a gentle posture, hands wrapped around a cup that had probably gone lukewarm because they weren't drinking it. Their gaze kept flicking toward the counter, then away, then back again, like a moth circling a porch light but not landing. It was Raymond. He was dressed neatly, as always, crisp shirt, tidy vest, looking like he belonged in an office, except his office was currently a cafe where a pigeon served coffee with the solemnity of a priest. Raymond saw you glance over. His eyes widened slightly. Then he looked away too quickly, pretending to study the wall as if the wall had interesting financial advice. Marshall's voice dropped to a whisper. That guy is extremely I wrote the note coded. Roald whispered back. He looks like he owes someone one. Lucky nodded sympathetically. That's the face of someone who has practiced a speech in their head and then forgot all the words when it mattered. Marina's expression was soft. Maybe we should not rush him. You nodded, because KK's advice, keep the light on, felt right. You walked to a table nearby, not too close, not too far, and sat. Brewster brought your group refills without being asked, like he understood that your presence here was part of the island doing its gentle work. Time passed in small, ordinary pieces. Roald tried to be quiet and succeeded in being only medium loud. Lucky unfolded a napkin and started doodling a tiny star. Marshall watched Raymond with the subtle focus of someone who pretended not to care but was, in fact, caring. Marina simply sat, hands around her cup, radiating patience. Raymond shifted in his seat. Once he stood, halfway, then sat again. Then he took a deep breath. He stood fully this time, and he walked toward the counter with the careful steps of someone approaching a cliff edge. Not because the cliff was dangerous, but because the moment was. Brewster met his gaze calmly. "Coo," Brewster said, as if Raymond were any other customer. Raymond adjusted his glasses with a trembling paw. His voice came out quiet. "I left something," he said. "A tin. A charm." Brewster didn't react dramatically. He simply nodded, reached beneath the counter and retrieved the tin box. He set it down gently. Raymond stared at it as if it were glowing. He didn't take it immediately. Instead, he swallowed and said, barely audible, Is she here?" Brewster's eyes softened. "Coo," which somehow meant not here, but she knows. Raymond's shoulders sagged in relief and disappointment at once, like he'd been carrying a basket that was both heavy and precious. He lifted the tin with both paws. For a second it looked like he might open it, but he didn't. He just held it, as if feeling the shape of his own past. Then Raymond turned, slowly, and his gaze landed on your table. You didn't wave, you didn't jump up. You simply looked back with the gentle steadiness the island had taught you. Raymond approached. Marshall sat a little straighter. Roald looked like he wanted to shout, "We did it!" and was fighting his own nature. Marina's smile was small and kind. Lucky's eyes shone. Raymond stopped at the edge of your table. He cleared his throat. "I think you found my bottle," he said. You nodded. "We did." Raymond's ears lowered. "Thank you." He hesitated, then added in a rush, "I didn't want to make it a big thing. I owe her. I owe all of you, really. This island—" His voice faltered. Marina spoke softly, saving him from the moment the way friends sometimes do. "It's okay," she said. "You don't have to rush." Raymond let out a slow breath. Marshall's voice was gentle in the way that proved he was capable of being gentle. "So, Sable made it." Raymond nodded. "On Star Night. I just arrived. It didn't feel like I belonged. Everyone was friendly, but I kept thinking I was an extra piece, like furniture you haven't decided where to put." Lucky nodded vigorously. "I have felt like furniture," Roald whispered. "Me too," even though he was usually furniture that ran in place. Raymond continued, eyes on the tin box. "Sable didn't say much," he said. He gestured vaguely like words weren't enough. "She gave me this charm, and I kept it. For a long time." Marina's eyes softened. "Because it helped." Raymond nodded. It does, but I saw her the other day, stitching, and I thought, I never thanked her properly. I never told her what it meant." Marshall raised an eyebrow. "So, you tried to return it?" Raymond's face tightened. "I tried to give it back, but then I panicked, and I thought, if I returned it anonymously, it would be easier for me." Lucky's voice was gentle. "Easier doesn't always mean wrong." Raymond's eyes lifted. "But it also doesn't mean brave." Silence settled, soft, not awkward. The cafe hummed around you, cups clinking, quiet conversation, the jazz tune like a slow heartbeat. You leaned forward slightly. "She knows," you said. "We told Mabel and Sable. She knows someone is coming back." Raymond swallowed. "And she didn't hate it," Marina smiled. "She looked hopeful." Raymond's shoulders loosened as if someone had untied a knot. He looked down at the tin. Then, with a small, trembling courage, he opened it. Inside, the little star charm rested in its cloth, still neat, still simple, still carrying the memory of shooting stars. Raymond touched it gently with one fingertip, like he was afraid he might smudge the meaning. "I don't want to give it back," he admitted in a whisper. "Not because I want to keep it selfishly, but because it reminds me that someone saw me, and I'm scared that if I return it, it'll be like saying goodbye to that version of me. Marshall's voice was quiet. You can keep the charm and still thank her. Raymond blinked. I can, Marina nodded. The gratitude is the important part. Lucky added, also you can have 2 important things. That's allowed. Roald leaned in, whispering fiercely, you can level up without losing your starter item. Marshall glanced at Roald. That's surprisingly apt. Raymond let out a small laugh, surprised by it, as if laughter had arrived before he'd given permission. And that laugh felt like the story's hinge, turning the day toward hope. Raymond closed the tin again. Careful. Then he looked at you, eyes clearer now. Will you, he began, then stopped, then tried again. Will you come with me to Able Sisters? Not all of you. I mean, unless you want to, but I think I can do it if it's not just me walking into that doorway alone. Marina stood first, smooth and certain. Of course. Roald stood like a soldier. Quest continues. Lucky raised his paw. I will be moral support and snack carrier. Marshall stood last, pretending it was no big deal. Fine. Someone has to make sure Roald doesn't announce your feelings at full volume. Roald whispered, scandalized. I would never. Marshall's expression said, you absolutely would. Raymond clutched the tin box close to his chest like it was both a shield and a promise. And together you stepped out of the roost into the bright, kind day, walking toward a small shop full of thread and quiet courage. Chapter 11. The Doorway Moment. Able Sisters' sign swung gently as you approached, as if greeting you. Inside, Mabel looked up with immediate recognition. Oh, hi, she chirped. Then she saw Raymond and her expression softened instantly. Oh! Raymond stopped just inside the doorway, paws tight on the tin. Sable sat at her machine, head lowered, stitching steadily. But then, maybe because she felt the air change, Sable's hands paused. Slowly, she looked up. Her eyes landed on Raymond. For a second, the world held its breath in the softest possible way. Raymond swallowed, then took a step forward. Sable, he said, voice small but steady. I'm sorry I did this in a weird way. Sable didn't speak, but her gaze didn't retreat either. Raymond opened the tin, lifted the charm slightly so she could see it. I kept it, he said quickly, as if confessing, because it mattered. It still matters. But I realized I never told you what it did for me. He took a shaky breath. That night, Raymond said, I felt like I didn't belong. And you didn't make me prove myself. You didn't make me explain. You just gave me something small and kind. And it made me feel like there was room for me here. Like I wasn't an extra piece. His voice wavered, then steadied again. So, thank you, he said. I'm not returning it as a, here, take this back. I'm just finally returning the moment to you, the gratitude, the truth. Sable's eyes shimmered slightly. She reached up, slowly, and touched the edge of the charm, not taking it away, just acknowledging it. Then she looked at Raymond. Her voice was quiet, but clear. You belonged, she said. Raymond's breath caught. Sable continued, words careful, chosen like stitches. You still do. Mabel made a tiny squeak and pretended it was a cough. Marina's smile widened, warm as sunrise. Roald's eyes watered, and he tried to hide it by flexing. Lucky whispered, I'm going to cry in a fashionable way. Marshall looked away as if he suddenly found the wall extremely interesting. Sable's shoulders loosened. And then, because this was Animal Crossing, because feelings didn't have to be loud to be real, Sable gave Raymond the smallest nod. It was not a dramatic gesture. It was a stitch being tied off securely. Raymond closed the tin, hands steadier now. He smiled. Just a little. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay." And in that moment the mystery resolved not with fireworks, but with something better for bedtime. A gentle truth, a repaired thread, a hope that didn't shout. Chapter 12. A lullaby ending and a new beginning. Later, as the sun leaned toward afternoon, you walked back through the plaza together. Isabel spotted your group and waved, tail wagging like a cheerful metronome. "Oh, hey, everything okay?" she called. You gave her a thumbs up. Isabel beamed. "Wonderful!" Roald finally allowed himself one victory whisper. "We saved a heart," Marshall muttered. "It saved itself," Marina said softly. "We just helped it find the door." Lucky nodded, satisfied. "And nobody even had to fight a tarantula." You laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that feels like a blanket. As you parted ways, Raymond paused near the plaza fountain. He looked up at the sky, bright, calm, endlessly patient. "Thank you," he said again, "not just to you, but to the island." Then he walked off toward the beach path, tin box tucked safely away, steps lighter than before. You lingered a moment longer in the plaza. The bulletin board fluttered in the breeze. The flowers nodded. And somewhere in the distance you could almost hear KK strumming, as if the island itself had decided to play a soft ending chord. You headed home with pockets full of small things. Shells, maybe a spare snack, maybe a bit of wood you'd picked up without thinking. But the thing you carried most was the feeling that Lullaby Key had room for everyone, and that even a message bottle, just paper and glass and salt water, could lead to something gentle and brave. That night, when the stars came out, the sky looked a little like it did on Star Night. Not 1,000 shooting stars, just enough to remind you, hope doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be there.